Family, what's going on? We are back on another episode of Faith and Fame with me, your girl, Brittney Q. Today, we are talking about toxic relationships, narcissism, and domestic violence. And I have an incredible special guest to help me unpack the whole thing. Stay tuned. This is Faith and Fame with Brittney Q. Hill. And again, like I said, today we're talking about relationships, toxic relationships to be exact, narcissism, domestic violence, all of that. And I have an incredible special guest with me, the Alma Davis of Alma Domestic Violence Foundation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You look beautiful, girl.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
Tell me, what's the recipe? Give me the sauce, because you're fine. What's going on?
I think I would like to say it's not having a lot of stress, but that is untrue.
That does help, though.
It does.
Eliminate the stress.
Eliminate the stress and
minding your business, drinking your water.
That's a great
Jesus.
one. That's all of the above. All of the above. Yes.
I'm trying to look like you in a few years. You look amazing. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
So look, I wanted to unpack this conversation because we've been seeing a crazy rise in narcissism. I mean, it's like, I think back to maybe like the 90s when I was coming up, nobody was really talking about narcissism, but now it's like a very prevalent conversation. So I want to unpack this topic of narcissism and why it leads to toxic relationships and then ultimately domestic violence. So let's start here.
Okay.
Because you have some history with all of this yourself.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yes.
As do I, but you're the professional. Okay. So first of all, just tell us a little bit about your story and what even led you to creating the Alma Foundation.
Okay. So I grew up in a household of domestic violence. It was a part of my life, most of my life growing up. And from having seen that play out daily in my household, at the young age of 14, I started looking for someone to have a relationship with, very young age. Yeah. And I did. I ended up with someone else that was 14 that I thought was this superhero. I mean, it was somebody I could divulge and tell information about, like the personal domestic violence that I was watching at home, and they sort of understood. Right. But it turned out that same person became my first abuser.
Wow. At 14?
At 14 years old, I received my first set of black eyes.
Wow.
From him. Wow. From him. And I said first because he ended up giving me two sets.
Wow.
The beginning and the end.
Wow.
So that was my real first introduction into it. And at that young age, you're trying to process, is this normal? Is this right? You're looking at family. Yeah. Yes, this is what I'm seeing from aunts, other people down the line. So at that young age, I began to live with it and just say, I guess this is how it's supposed to be.
So that's what started it, and it continued how?
It continued because it was a continuous build-up. Yeah. So my first incident physically was him giving me a set of black eyes, but I did not see and did not understand and know all the precursors before that.
Right, yeah. What to look for.
What to look for. What I thought was, oh, he's really into me. He understands. He's a protector. Was more so, no, it's the control. It's the ownership, because I have to lure you in and I have to make sure you feel safe with me.
So it's interesting because a lot of those traits are indicative of narcissism. I'm familiar, a little bit with how it all begins. They start by love bombing you, making you feel like you're just, so special. You're the one, and I want to be with you for the rest of my life. Right. To create that sense of safety and security. And then it moves on to what they call the devaluing stage, where now all of a sudden they're picking you apart. You ain't good enough. You ain't worth nothing.
Oh, what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with
what things you need to improve? And that, even that young, even as an adult, you're thinking, oh, he's really he or she, because it goes both ways. He or she is really interested in me, that they're paying that much attention to me.
That much attention.
That they want to make me better.
Listen, it's interesting you say that. I got out of a toxic relationship a while back, and I remember it started off that same way. I mean, I was like, oh, he's the one. He couldn't do no wrong. He took me on all these fancy dates. And then slowly but surely he started picking me apart. And I remember we would FaceTime, and I remember distinctly one time he was like, well, why your face breaking out? Why you got this bump here, this bump there? And at first I was like, he don't mean no harm by it. But when I saw over time he would continually pick me apart, and I said something about it, he said, well, as your man, I thought you would just want me to notice everything about you. Most women would appreciate that. But really, I saw what was going on. So that's, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, there's so much to go with that. So talk to me about, because you said it started there and it continued. Why do you think women end up in repetitive abusive relationships? You would think after the first one, we would say, okay, I'm never doing that again. But oftentimes it's another one and another one.
Right. Number one, because it's learned behavior. You gotta, whatever you've been shown or seen, whether that's a positive relationship. A lot of people think, like, so when we're talking about men and women relationships, they think, oh, well, if she had a dad in the family, then she would know. Well, that's far from the truth. My dad was present, but there were other things that caused, and other things he'd gone through his life that caused him to be abusive. So a lot of times, people are looking for, there's a longing there, a sense of longing and wanting to be loved. And so a lot of times we'll dumb down red flags or what we hear or what we're feeling.
He's not perfect.
Yeah, nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
Right,
just his flaws. Yeah.
Right. And then here's the key thing. A lot of times you don't want the other person to see your flaws.
That's true.
So you will mask, you will forgive and mask what they're showing you to mask your own insecurities.
Oh, now that's deep. Wow. Why do we do that? It's just all learned behavior.
It's all learned behaviors.
So what would you say are some other key red flags that both women and men can identify early on? Because what I think a lot of people fail to realize, that domestic violence is not just a woman being beaten or mistreated. It's men too, children, like you said. What are some red flags that we can identify early on to keep us from falling into this whirlwind of abuse?
The first thing I always tell people is control. When someone is trying to dominate you or control, because people go into relationships not realizing you were an independent person before you got into that relationship. And you still should be able to be independent. If your independence is being taken away, then you need to question, is that healthy or not?
Right.
Because for most people, you want what I have and what you have to come together, and we complement each other. Not you change me, not you take away from who I am, because you're really supposed to be attracted to who I was from the beginning. So I look at, a lot of control. What is controlling? I feel like if someone's very insecure about you, and they're showing you, they're putting their insecurities towards you, that's not healthy. It's not healthy, because that will only build and build and build. A lot of times, too, people get in relationships and they're in such a hurry. And I'm a big advocate of, no, it takes time for you to really get to know me and for me to get to know you. An actor, anybody can put on their best foot forward in the beginning.
Absolutely.
But it takes time, because you can only play that role for so long.
Right. Well, because, realistically, everybody does that. Men and women.
Absolutely.
When we, first meet somebody, we want to present our best selves, our representative. But I always say it takes at least 4 to 6 months for that person to actually feel comfortable enough to reveal who they actually are, when that mask begins to fall.
Right, but so often, I hate to say this, we're in a society where everything is so sexualized. So people think as soon as I meet you, I need to be sexually involved with you, and then you don't get an opportunity to really know that other person, because you've already given of yourself to them. So that's a big. And then we sometimes, I say we people, they make that mistake, that happens, and then they want, okay, well, now I want you to get to know me. Well, he or she doesn't have to. Yeah.
Wow. That's true, though. Why do you feel like we equate sex with love? Talk to us.
Wow, that's a deep one to unpack. Because so many people don't know what real love is.
That's good, yeah.
They feel the first person that shows them any type of attention,
physical
which
intimacy,
is that means, oh, they really love me.
Yeah.
They really love me, and that's so far from the truth. So far from the truth.
So I want to go back to your story a little bit, because I've heard it previously, and I want you to share a little bit about your relationship dynamic with your father, because domestic violence doesn't just take place in intimate romantic relationships. It's also in the household. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my dad, he had a history of, meaning he was in the military. He came from a town in South Georgia where a lot of racist things were still happening. So you got all these different things compiling on the household. And he was an alcoholic as well. And so a lot of times when you start mixing in alcohol, drugs, on top of other stressors, you become abusive. Whether that's verbally, whether that's mentally, eventually physically. And so he and I always had I don't want to say power struggle, because I was the baby of the family, but I was always saying, wait a minute, if I'm watching the Cosbys at the time, and this is what their family looks like, mine doesn't, so let me ask questions. The more I asked questions, the more I got in trouble.
Wow.
But I wasn't right. The more I challenged him on
that's what it was.
What he's doing, then he took that out on me because I wasn't supposed to ask questions. So he and I had a lot of struggle going on. As a matter of fact, I moved out. I think I was 16, 17 years old, and I chose to do the street versus staying in the house because I was running from abuse. So I was getting abused by him, and abused by my boyfriend. So it was double. So I said, well, I'd rather be out, and try to get rid of some of that violence. As we got older, I was 22 when I had my first daughter. And I just remember always wanting to protect her, and not wanting her to grow up in that environment. And so I tried to sort of shield her from that. And it was actually in church one day that I had this revelation. It was a Father's Day, and I was there with my child, and the pastor said, how can you not forgive someone that doesn't know any better? And a light bulb went off, and it was like, wait a minute, but he had to know better. And in all honesty, God said to me, no, look at his history. Just as this is the way you've been taught, how come you don't know, how do you not know that might not be his thing too? And when you dig deep, it was a learned behavior for him. It's generational. And families being dysfunctional, making things normal that are not normal. No one stopping to say, hey, how can we get some help? Because it was taboo to share your business out with other people. And I just learned that was my dad's story too. And so it wasn't until he got in his older age, in his 70s, I continued to do the work that I do. And I would drop little nuggets, little hints here and there. Now, he was out of the whole physical. That had been years and years prior. But there were still elements of the abuse. But not just from him, but it swapped because my mother unintentionally they both became very verbal abusive to each other. So as I watched him and I gave him things to do, I would challenge him to be better, to go get help, get therapy. And one day he decided to do that in his 70s. Because I talked about so much about what we do that in my organization. We give people free therapy. And I saw his life change.
He
tremendously.
Took it seriously.
He did. And to see a grown man at that age who wished he could have gotten that knowledge before then to make different choices was, it's something to see. And on my dad's deathbed, we had a real conversation, because what started to happen as I began to forgive him, his and our relationship bloomed. It blossomed. Forgiveness
was what caused it to grow.
Forgiveness. And his siblings, different people would come to me if they needed something from my dad. I'll talk to Alma, because he had a different type of respect for me. He just wanted to be forgiven and understood.
Tell me why you think his respect for you was different.
I think it goes a lot too, because I didn't treat him with the animosity a lot of times of the hurt that comes with that. Because I understood. I wanted my own healing. I wanted to make sure I was being positive for my children. So I couldn't show that to him and still be happy. When we talk about unforgiveness, it damages
Eats
you.
away at your soul.
Right.
Yeah.
The other person can be going on about their
Chilling.
business,
Yep.
happy, having a good time, and you over mad. They're
Miserable.
not thinking about you.
Right.
You know, they've gone on with life. And so I think he saw that, and he recognized that in the way I treated him, and the way we corresponded.
Right.
Just out of love. I showed him love.
That. Radical forgiveness led to your own freedom and healing. I love that. That's beautiful. Talk to us about your foundation, girl.
Well, the Alma Domestic Violence Foundation was started 17 years ago, in 2005. Yeah, it's a long time to be doing this work. And it was under the premise of I didn't want someone else to not have the resources like I didn't have them.
Right.
And so it started with us just finding little ways to give back. And the more and more I dove into it, the more and more I became an expert in it. I wanted to understand the numbers of people that were being affected. When we look at only 5% of cases are reported. Why is that? You know, and those are the type of questions I wanted answers to.
Right.
From people being afraid to report it, the whole manipulation, domination that goes inside of domestic violence.
Right.
You know, there's so many different layers. And a lot of times people don't even realize that they're in domestic violence relationships.
Yeah, true.
You know, so getting educated on that, and the more and more I built and researched and started finding real solutions, the larger the foundation grew.
Wow.
And so now as a foundation, 17 years, we do everything from rapid rehousing, which means helping people transition out of shelters, finding safe places, getting them back on their feet, getting them back financially stable, because that is the number one reason why people stay in domestic violence.
Out of financial.
It's finances, lack of or control of. We do free therapy for a year. So helping people unpack. Yeah, you got to unpack. You got to face the ugliness in order to become whole. Absolutely, absolutely. Helping people find healthy relationships. So what does that look like? Not just an intimate relationship, but what does that look like as a whole?
Right.
And so we just look at all the different areas, and we want people to be holistic.
Yeah.
So we service men, we service women, we service young kids.
Do you see, I'm just curious, because most domestic violence cases, I would assume, are primarily women.
Yes.
Do you see a lot of men looking for help?
We do now. I think men are starting to understand, first of all, are having their own voice. It's a very embarrassing thing when you go through domestic violence.
Right. Real quick, before you continue to answer that, because men are really getting beat up too by women?
Yeah. Well, not just women.
Oh, men.
And men.
In same-sex relationships.
Right. It's the number one, domestic violence is the number one issue in the LGBTQ plus community.
Wow, now that's enlightening.
Yes. It is the number one issue on college campuses. They call it dating violence.
Wow.
And we are seeing so many teenagers. The numbers are 10 million children, 10 million teenagers a year are experiencing dating violence. So you're seeing more and more of this. And there are some very, very aggressive women. And very abusive women. You know, again, we talk about not just physical, but verbally. How do you talk to somebody? The mental manipulation. So yes, we see quite a few men.
So even if it's just verbal and emotional abuse, it's still considered domestic violence.
It is still considered.
And I think that's what the misconception is that if somebody's not putting their hands on you, then most people wouldn't consider it domestic violence, but it is.
Absolutely. The physical part is the last part. You have to go through all these other major steps before you get to the physical.
Right.
You can be sexually abused. You can be even religiously abused. People hold that over your head.
That's a whole nother episode.
A whole nother issue. You can be, what we said, physical, mental, verbally. It's there's so many layers to domestic violence. And again, people don't recognize. They don't recognize what's a healthy relationship.
Right.
So they don't understand, okay, wait a minute, this is not good for me. Yeah.
Whew, this is enlightening. I would have never even thought or considered that the men who are abused are, you know, in the LGBTQ, whatever the blesses, the community. Wow.
And we see a lot of the population of people who have vulnerable diseases. So domestic violence is high in cancer patients. It's high in the AIDS community because you're vulnerable.
Your immune system is weak.
Not just in your immune systems. There's a lot of abuse that takes place. So if I'm going to use a relationship, man and woman in a relationship, they're married. One of the partners, let's say the wife is sick with cancer, and the male may be used to that person cooking, that person being a strong household. That can be very frustrating.
Right.
That is an added stressor. That person not being able to take care of themselves anymore and needing dependence from that other person. That's another stressor. Even if that person is a breadwinner, bringing in money, that, those are all compiled things. So it is a large population of people who are suffering from certain disease, from any vulnerable or long-term disease, that are getting abused. And then again, you go through, I'm not myself. I can't be my best self for this person. So let me be subjected to different things to let them know I'm still here for them.
Yeah. And then I also just think about, like, one reason why people may stay in it or endure is because of the embarrassment and the shame that comes with it.
Yes.
Because it is embarrassing to say I'm getting, abused. And then especially if you're in a situation where you have kids, people might want to stay because of the kids or financial reasons. And other people are looking at you, well, why don't you just leave? It's not always that easy.
It's not that easy.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why only 5% of cases are reported.
There you have it.
The numbers are 1 out of every 4 women, 1 out of every 7 males.
Wow.
But that's with 5%. When you add the other 95%, is more like 1 out of 2 women, 1 out of 4 males.
Yeah.
And the pandemic did not help. It exacerbated.
Right. People are at home.
People are at home.
Enduring.
And you might be, well, I don't see you but a couple hours a day because you're gone.
Yeah.
You're working. But now I'm subjected to spending all day, all night with you.
Right.
What additional stressors. You got children at home who you're not used to being at home with. So you add all that stuff, and we've been very busy from the pandemic.
I believe it. I'm like, that's great for your business, but that's not so great because that means there's more people dealing with this. Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Alma. I do something called an elevator sermon. So I'm going to ask you to just give us an encouraging word. Talk to the men, the women, the children that may be in a current situation, maybe have dealt with it, maybe are dealing with the shame and the embarrassment. Maybe that's why they're staying in it. Just talk to us about, or talk to those people and help them find a way to cope, get out, and how they can reach out to you for additional help.
Okay. The first thing I would say to you is that you are not alone. I know that has been told to you over and over, and nobody understands, but that is far from the truth. There are people, there are programs out here that care about you, that love you, and they want the best for you. And being in a toxic domestic violence relationship is not the best. You deserve better. One of the organizations is the one that I lead, which is the Alma Domestic Violence Foundation. You can call us anytime. We have a 24-hour hotline. You can reach us on the web at Alma DVF. That's Alma, D for domestic, V for violence, F for foundation.org. All of our information is there. You can even send us private messages via social media. We are Alma_DVF on Instagram and Twitter, and Alma DVF on Facebook. So we are here. We will listen to you. We will help you. If you are ready to get out, we can help you with a safety plan. We just want to make sure that you deserve the best that you can get in this life, and it is not being abused.
Amen. That was incredible. Thank you for being
here.
Of course. All right, y'all. That concludes another episode of Faith and Fame with me, your girl, Brittney Q. Make sure you leave us reviews, like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on all social media platforms at Faith and Fame TV.